Good day and welcome to ANN7. We bring you the leadership conversations from the Mountain Kingdom of Lesotho. And joining us is the Right Honorable, the Prime Minister, Dr. Pagadita Bethwel Musisidi, the Prime Minister of Lesotho. Sir, welcome to ANN7.
Thank you very much indeed for having me.
Prime Minister, sir, it's been 50 years and this year, Lesotho will be celebrating its 50th year of independence. What have been the highlights of that time?
Well, it is indeed a very joyous occasion for our nation, the jubilee of our independence. And looking back, one can see a country that is completely transformed from the colonial time. Whichever way you look at it, economically, in terms of infrastructure development, socially, and so on. For instance, if I may just illustrate, when we got independence in 1966, Lesotho had only 1 kilometer, believe it or not, 1 kilometer of tarred road. But today, most of the main roads are tarred, not only in town, but most of the main roads going out, connecting the districts are tarred. And besides that, there has been quite a good network of gravel roads that reach out into the villages. What's more, you'll find that in terms of, for instance, electrification, at independence, there were hardly 30 people that had electricity in their homes. But today, there are tens and tens of thousands of people that now have electricity and running water in their homes. These are the sort of illustrations of infrastructure development that is there for everybody to see.
But if I'm not disturbing you, just at that point, sir, if you think about it, there's also been very horrific diseases such as HIV and AIDS that have devastated Southern African countries. How do you think Lesotho did respond to that?
Yes, indeed. The scourge of HIV and AIDS has been a major challenge for our people in Southern Africa as a whole, but in Lesotho in particular, because we are ranked number 2 in the world in terms of the prevalence of HIV. And that is a serious challenge for us, because we are a small nation, and when you have that kind of prevalence, it is indeed a major threat. But we have responded well in terms of the intervention programs that we have come up with. We decided that it is in the interest of every citizen of Lesotho to know their HIV status. And I mounted a campaign that is called Know Your Status Campaign, the KYS. And it has served us well, because now people are coming forward to test voluntarily. And recently, about 2 months or so ago, we launched the Test and Treat a program. I'm told that we are one of the first on the continent to launch this program. And that is because once it is a paradigm shift in the sense that, as you will recall, HIV positive people had to have a certain level for them to be put on treatment. But that has been proved scientifically to not be a good way to go about it. The best is once somebody tests positive, they should immediately be put on treatment. That has a better chance of ensuring that they will live healthy lives.
Right.
And we've mounted that in this country.
Right. Fantastic. Looking back at 50 years. But to today, talking of political growth, maturity, democratic practice, yes, and of course the well-being of citizens, there have been reports, and they continue, unfortunately, to come across that Lesotho is an unstable country. It's a country where the opposition is being repressed, and there have been allegations of political assassinations. What is your reaction to those reports? How would you describe Lesotho today?
Well, looking back, and in particular at the road we have traveled, I think we have come a long way in terms of consolidating democracy in the kingdom. You will recall that the very first post-independence elections in 1970 were actually aborted by the then Prime Minister, Chief Jonathan, because he had lost the elections. And he refused to step down, suspended the constitution of the country, declared a state of emergency, and arrested all the opposition leaders. I was then a university student in my final year of my undergraduate studies. And I was one of those that were picked up and locked up for a year and 3 months without charge, without being convicted by a court of law. And when you look at that, where we've come from, and Chief Jonathan stayed a whole 27 years of a dictatorship regime. Eventually, he was toppled by the army. And from 1986, we were under military rule until 1992, when the constitution was reintroduced. The military arranged for a new constitution to be introduced. And so we are into our second constitution in 50 years. We are now into our third national flag. in 50 years, Chief Jonathan's flag that led us into independence. Right. Then the military came up with a new flag, and after 93, when we returned finally to democracy, we introduced a new flag for the kingdom. And so you can see that even the symbols of nationhood, the constitution, the flag, have been and have undergone some transition. Right. Yes. But having said that, I must say that from 1993, we've been a democracy, a thriving democracy at that. We've had all in all 8 elections, 6 of which were general elections and 2 local government elections. And we've also changed our electoral model to accommodate small parties that would otherwise not see their day in parliament under the first past the post parliamentary system that we had used from independence, we now have a mixed member proportional representation system, whereby 80 constituencies or 80 seats are constituency seats contested on a first past the post basis. We've added 40 additional seats that are shared by parties on a proportional representation basis. So that way we've tried to accommodate smaller parties so that each can find their way into parliament and thus make our parliament more representative. We are the only ones on the continent who've come up with this kind of model. We've also been trailblazers in terms of a coalition government on the continent. In 2012, after the general elections, no party had enough seats to form government on their own. The party that I lead had most seats, but not enough to form government. And the other parties, 3 parties, got together and pushed us into opposition. And indeed, we went into opposition. So I don't know if any other country on the continent have had a coalition government. But we are now into our second coalition government following the 2015 general elections. And it is a 7-party coalition government.
Quite numerous.
Yes, indeed. And but it is holding. And if the year and 4 months of this government is anything to go by, then this government will see its full term.
Quite commendable, sir, as you say. But in terms of, looking at coalition politics, it's more about marriages of convenience, so to speak. But wouldn't you say then this beggars questions about, how a country develops a singular vision for its development?
I think coalition governments are a very humbling experience.
I'd like to concur.
In that the arrogance of doing it on your own, it's not there. Right. They teach you that you need the other guys to go along. And as they say, if you want to go fast, you go alone. Right. But if you want to go far, you go with others.
Right.
Yeah. So it's not all...
Quite a maxim. But can I add also that I know there's democratic, constitutional reforms underway, taking place now, a series of reforms that your government is working on to bring in stability and further democratic practice in Lesotho. But I'm just wondering, at this stage we have leaders and members of oppositions who are in South Africa who have on self-imposed exile. And how are you working out the reconciliation process, perhaps, to actually create an inclusive situation in Lesotho? I know SADC has been working hard with you. Our Deputy President, Cyril Ramaphosa, has also been the envoy leading that process on behalf of SADC. How are we working out constitutionally and in terms of peace processes to ensure an inclusive political situation, unlike the reports we're reading about of instability and so on?
The present coalition government, in its founding document, has reform on the agenda. Constitutional reform, public service reform, judicial reform, parliamentary reform, and what else? There are 5. It's a 5-pronged reform program. And that we did that on our own, as part of our founding document. Our coalition agreement envisages that we will go into a constitutional reform program, a public service reform program, a judicial service program, a parliamentary service reform program, and a security, of course, security reform program. So when Deputy President Ramaphosa came as SADC facilitator and with his team produced they call it a SOMILES program or report that talks about a reform program. This was not a new one for us. They were preaching to the converted. And indeed, when the Pumape Commission report talks about reform, they are talking about something that on our own we have devised programs for reform. So for us, that is the way to go, because with that kind of reform, we will consolidate our democracy, the rule of law, and good governance.
Prime Minister, sir, one of the things about Lesotho, of course, is economic development. You have mentioned several milestones that have been achieved. But at this stage, how is Lesotho ensuring service delivery through important programs that ensure the well-being of its citizens?
Yes, indeed. That's a very good question, and thank you for it. You know, in our view, the best resource we have is our people. And developing that resource through education is priority for us. As a result, we have, from way back after independence, we have offered scholarships to our students going to university, government scholarships. And that is still the case today. Every student who goes not only to university, but to a tertiary institution is sponsored by government. And that is because we believe that our people are our best resource. We also have introduced free primary education, to ensure that every boy, every girl does get basic education. At the secondary level, that kind of assistance is currently limited to boys and girls from poor families. Those who cannot afford, we give them assistance through their secondary education. Hopefully, in due course, we will be able to extend that to everybody. And once we reach that, then all education will be free in the kingdom. For us, that's very important. We've also, in terms of social intervention programs, have introduced an old age pension, which is given to our people. We put the age for qualification quite high at 70. And that was because we needed to ensure that we could actually carry the burden. But it is serving our people very well. It is a very popular program, which our people have named it after me, because it was introduced during my time. When they go to end their old age pension, they are saying, Baribayam CCD.
Right.
Yes, and that's right, which is very humbling indeed. But that is the kind of, intervention on the social protection programs we have come up with.
And additionally, of course, President Zuma was here not so long ago, and you were discussing the Southern African Customs Union and re-engineering this process that's been going on for the last 105 years to actually be an important vehicle for growth in the region. And of course, that'll be capital investment in infrastructure, in developing nodes of economic development and so on. How do you see this coming to happen?
SACU is for us in Lesotho a very important regional union, and it is incidentally one of the oldest on the continent. It has served us very well. For a very long time, it was easily our biggest source of revenue. Yes, but hence it is very important for us. Of course, the SACU revenues have been declining over the years, and we've had to look at other ways of ensuring that we'll have adequate revenue to cater for the needs of our peoples. And of course, water has come in very handy. We have a big program, a project that we are engaged in with the Republic of South Africa, the Lesotho Highlands Water Project. The water that you drink in Gauteng flows from here.
Did you have to say that?
It's just to state the obvious. But then it's not free, eh?
Right.
You are paying for it. So you don't have to feel bad because you are paying for it. And that is indeed a very important source of revenue for us. And we are now in the process of implementing phase 2 of the Lesotho Highlands Water Project, which will not only ensure a steady and reliable source of water for South Africa, but it will also generate electricity for us. Currently, we generate just about 1/3 of our electricity requirements, and the rest we get from South Africa, Eskom, and even as far as Mozambique. But once phase 2 is operational and the hydroelectricity component is functional, we will be generating 1,200 megawatts of electricity. And our requirements are estimated at 200 megawatts, which means we'll have 1,000 megawatts of electricity for sale.
Right.
Yes, and that again will be an added advantage for or another source of revenue for us.
But it's just not getting easier, is it? I mean, considering that, Lesotho is also pretty much dependent on aid to meet some of its objectives. And 150 million in USAID and other programs. And I'm just wondering how this is impacting how you see these development programs taking root and beginning to bear fruit for the people of the kingdom. How are you working around responsive policy measures, perhaps, to counter the fact that there's been a general decline of late in sort of aid to countries in Africa?
Yeah. Yes, indeed. We are looking at our own resources. We have begun to develop our mining sector. We mine diamonds here. and they may not be as many as you would have, say, for instance, in Botswana, but what we lack in quantity, we make up for in quality. Our diamonds are of very good standard, and we are now currently developing new mines, so the mining sector is promising to serve us well.
And can I mention at that point that, it always seems that Africans tend to move faster than governments can respond. I see a situation where, people from other countries are moving further into Southern African countries, people from further north coming into Southern African countries, and that increases trade, perhaps in the informal sectors and so on. But anyway, that's beside the point. There's also the small matter of Lesotho citizens who live in South Africa. And there was a meeting not so long ago with the Minister of Home Affairs in South Africa on a program to get people to come back and register so we don't have too many people in South Africa without legal documents. And are such programs really that you are talking about going to be not perhaps essential then in making sure that people can return and invest in their capital, the human capital in Lesotho as well? How would such programs accelerate processes of dynamic growth here?
Yeah, they are absolutely critical for dynamic growth, as you've rightly put it, and also to ensure free movement of people, goods, and services. As you know, Lesotho is not only landlocked, but it is South Africa locked. Right. Because we are right in the belly of this economic giant called the Republic of South Africa. So for us, facilitation of free movement is critical, and indeed we are on a good wicket, to use the language of cricket, yes, on this one, right. Because our ministers of Home Affairs in South Africa, Minister Malusi Gigaba, and our Minister of Home Affairs this side, Advocate Lekgetho Rakuane, have come up with novel programs that will indeed ease the burden that our people carry.